My name is Bruce Prince. I'm Vice President of Sales for ProCut. I manage major accounts and distribution. I've been at ProCut for 31 years. We're exclusively known for brake lathes in particular. It's been sort of our focus business throughout my career here. Particularly, there are two styles of lathes that we offer. A bench style lathe, which is more traditional, and then of course our on-car lathe, which, no pun intended, is sort of our cutting edge product because of the way it addresses vehicle issues and problems. We also have gotten into some other areas that are not directly brake lathe related. We have a tire mule, and also on the HD side, we just came out with our new X1 heavy duty truck lathe, which I'm super excited about because it's tapping into a whole new market segment. So if I was talking to a shop that was only replacing brakes, the only thing I would say to them is that you're not selling as many brake jobs as you could if you offered your customer machining option. I can guarantee it. I've been fortunate that I've worked with a lot of our major account repair chains during my career. You know, one of the things that gets me excited about coming to work every day is that I know our product makes customers money. In fact, in my 31 years with ProCut, I've heard numerous customers tell me that our on-car brake lathe is one of the most profitable pieces of equipment they've ever put in their shop. When you think about it, a $15,000 investment for a top-of-the-line, state-of-the-art on-car lathe generally is going to return anywhere from a quarter to $500,000 back to a business if it's used on a regular basis. More importantly, I've seen a lot of success with shops that offer a machining option to their customers as far as increasing the volume of brake jobs that they're selling, which ultimately is meaning the cash register is ringing. So the most expensive item on a brake service quote is always going to be the set of rotors, and when you can remove that cost from the ticket, offer a machining service instead, which is just as profitable as the markup on the rotors, you can get the customer out the door at a better price point but still make 100% gross profit on the labor. So it's definitely, you have to have one to see it in action, but I've told customers if we don't pay for ourselves in a busy shop within the first 3 to 6 months, I'll give you your money back. I can't think of when I've ever taken a lathe back from a customer. Nobody wants to give it back once they experience the power of profit with an on-car lathe. You know, basically anyone who's in the automotive repair business would benefit simply because brakes is really one of the key profit drivers in the repair segment in general. In other words, if you're in the business of fixing cars, if you're not selling a lot of brake service, you're not making the max potential that you could be as a repair shop. Brake lathes in particular, we've seen a trend where people have kind of moved away from machining at one point because rotors were relatively inexpensive, and you know, it's easy to replace a rotor, but the truth is rotor replacement doesn't address a number of technical issues that could cause the brake system not to wear or perform correctly. More importantly, nowadays, consumers, you know, we're traveling down the road at, you know, 75, 80, you know, cars are heavier, rotors and braking systems are much more sturdily built, I guess is the way to put it. As a result of that, there's plenty of room to machine rotors. Rotors have gotten more expensive, so if a shop is only offering rotors as the only alternative for brake service at their location, consumers, you know, tend to not always act on quotes that they're given for brake repair. And so a shop that uses a brake lathe like ours can benefit directly just because it'll help them sell more brake work, it'll help them fix cars better so that the braking system performs better. You know, when you think about it, what's the most important safety system on a vehicle besides a sober driver and a seatbelt? It's the braking system on the car. So, you know, a lot of shops are starting to understand this better, and you know, it's been our core business for all the time that I've been here. When you look at most shops, particularly independent shops, the shop owners are very good at the craft of repairing cars. That is their focus. But sometimes, and I'm not saying this applies to all shops, but a lot of shops, you know, they're so focused on doing the skill that they're perfect at, they're good at, fixing the cars, that they don't realize there's metrics that are happening around their business that they should be tracking. On the dealership side, there are point of sale systems that track the decline rates on service, and what we're seeing on the OEM dealership side is that those rates can be as high as 60–70% on brake work. It's no secret that household budgets across the United States are stretched, and if a car still stops, even though it's not stopping perfectly, the consumer may feel that it's okay to decline until the car reaches a point where they must address the problem. With the independent side, we don't see tracking nearly as much, and I don't think that shops are really aware that they could be selling a ton more brake service if they offered their customer a more attractive price point, and that's easily accomplished by offering a machining service. Not to mention, it's 100% gross profit on labor. So they're not losing any money when they don't sell a rotor. They're making just about as much money, and they're getting the customer out the door at a price point that makes them happy and sells the service. We actually did a pilot with one chain that will remain anonymous, but we put brake lathes in all their stores in a certain market. I think there were 17 in total. Within the first 90 days of tracking their profit improvement on brake sales, brake service sales, gross profit on labor, all the different factors that are part of the benefit of having an on-car lathe. They were tracking basically $150,000 higher gross sales in brakes, and after the first year, their brake service segment went up by over $1 million across those 17 stores. If you talk about impact, when the cash register's ringing, that's impact. No shop owner got into the business of fixing cars to do substandard work or to, you hear the horror stories of some shops that are out there taking advantage of customers, but the reality is most shops across the United States, they take pride in their workmanship, and their goal is to exceed their customer expectations. And so that means they have to exceed the customer's expectations on price. How cost effectively can they get them out the door? Workmanship, what's the quality of the work that they're doing? And also just the ability to get to their vehicle. If you're a busy shop, how fast can you get my car in? So when you look at ProCut as far as how we can help in that scenario, well, first of all, we can get the customer, when you offer a machining service, it's no secret that rotors are the most expensive item on an invoice. You can take it out, you can remove that cost by machining, but still make 100% gross profit. Secondly, as far as quality of repair, we address lateral runout. Every time you use a ProCut machine on a vehicle, that rotor is perfectly matched to the hub that it spins on, and there'll never be an opportunity for DTV to cause pulsation. That vehicle will stop smoothly throughout the life of the installed brake parts. Third, productivity. We can shave hours off of a typical brake job so that if you're a busy shop, obviously if you've got a wait list, you want to get those customers in and out as fast as possible. I know shops that have wait lists that are up to a month long, and eventually customers just go find another shop when they have to wait 4 weeks to get their vehicle serviced. So they need to have their car count as high as possible during the day, and an on-car brake lathe will certainly do that because we can turn most rotors in under 10 minutes. And when you look at larger trucks, for instance, where there's hours of labor involved in removing rotors, we can eliminate all of that and turn that into a 10-minute job. So a truck that might take you a half a day to service, we can get that truck out in an hour. We see a cycle in the industry right now. A vehicle has a pulsation problem. Customer brings it to the shop. The shop is obviously going to test drive that vehicle and confirm that there is a problem. So they go out and sure enough, the brakes are shaking. So they sell the customer a brake job. They replace the rotors. The problem is that the rotors aren't fixing what's actually the root cause of that pulsation, but I'll get to that in a second. What's happening is after they put that rotor on and put the car back together and road test it, the car is going to drive smooth, which leads the shop to believe that A, the rotor was the problem because I replaced it and the car drives smooth, and B, I fixed the car because I replaced the rotor and the car drives smooth. What they don't realize is that runout between the rotor and hub assembly of that vehicle was what led to the rotor developing what's called thickness variation, or DTV, which was the root cause of pulsation. A lot of times shops will say, when you have a car that's pulsating, the rotor is warped, but that's not correct. Rotors don't actually warp, they develop thickness variation due to improper wear. And so ultimately, they'll put that rotor on, they'll sell that brake service to the customer, and the customer goes away, and then the same problem happens again. But here's where it gets really complicated for shops to understand. They think of comebacks, a comeback being where the customer comes back with the vehicle to complain, somewhere between 10 minutes after the customer leaves the shop to maybe 2 weeks after the vehicle's released back to the customer. With lateral runout and pulsation problems, that vehicle that they replace the rotor on is likely going to drive 6,000 to 9,000 miles before the problem returns. We're talking up to a year or more down the road, and oftentimes the customer is obviously dissatisfied because they had their brakes done less than a year ago, and when they had their original brakes, they drove it for 5-6 years without problems. So ultimately, they fault the shop for the workmanship and end up going to another shop. In fact, shops say, I don't have comebacks, and the reality is that's probably true because the customer doesn't come back, they go somewhere else, and then the cycle repeats itself unless that shop is diligently checking for run out, and then if it is there, present, as we suspect, correcting it with an on-car lathe. One of the unique things about ProCut as a company is that when it comes to what we build, brake lathes, I often tell customers, I can't help you balance a tire, I can't help you lift a car, but if you want to do brake service, I'm your guy. The reason I can say that is because brake lathes are all we do, we are in the unique position that we have been selected by most major car manufacturers as the supplier of choice for their brake service needs. And because of those relationships that we've developed with those OEM manufacturers, the people that build the cars that most shops are servicing, we often know what's coming down the road well before it even hits the marketplace. I can remember a situation with a 7-lug F-150 that Ford released. Nobody had had a 7-lug vehicle on the road before, so there was a lot of design from wheels to everything that needed to take place. We had the adapter built for that truck before it even was released to the general market. I think we do a pretty good job of staying up to date on trends in the marketplace and making sure our product is ready and capable to work on any vehicle that rolls into your shop. I've been selling brake lathes for 31 years, and when a rotor wears out, there's no brake lathe that I'm aware of that can put material back on a rotor, so you're still going to replace rotors. But in the case where you measure a rotor and there's still plenty of thickness to turn it, it's better to machine it simply from the standpoint that there are a lot of drivability issues with braking systems that are directly related to what's called lateral runout. And if you open up a brake spec guide, every brake spec guide for every vehicle on the road today has an installed lateral runout limit for the brake rotor. I see very few shops, even on the OE side, that take the time to measure rotors for runout when they install them. And as a result of that, quite frequently vehicles are being sent out on the road with excessive lateral runout. The manufacturer's tolerance for runout is basically saying if there's more than that measurable runout in the face of the rotor, it's not going to wear correctly. And that wear cycle is what causes pulsation, noise, judder, all the things that would bring a car back to a shop with an unhappy customer. We need to acknowledge the fact that most OEM manufacturers understand this, and they're building vehicles so that the hub and rotor assemblies are match sets when they leave the factory. And once that's disturbed in the field, when the vehicle's being serviced outside of warranty in particular, that's when these problems start to get introduced, and we can stop all of that by simply using our on-car lathe. The other thing I would say too is customer expectations on brake life are beginning to shift. We're in a renaissance period because it's not uncommon. Like for instance, I have a 2020 Dodge Ram pickup truck that has 45,000 miles on it. I'm not even halfway through my brake pad life yet, and that's a pickup truck that I tow a trailer with. So, we're seeing now cars going 70, 80, 90,000 miles on a set of OE brakes, and one of the reasons they're able to achieve that is because the runout is kept in check. In order for shops to keep that in check, they need to first measure runout, but more importantly, when that runout is exceeded, they need to use an on-car lathe to correct it. And if they do, they're going to be putting out brake service and brake jobs that last as long as the customer's expectation is. Because think about it, if I drive my vehicle, I bought it new and I drive it for 70,000 miles and I bring it to shop X to get my brakes done, my expectation reasonably is going to be that I'm going to get another 70,000 miles out of the next brake job that I get. And if we don't pay attention to runout, if we don't keep those things in check, just like the manufacturer did, and install quality parts, and even use an on-car lathe, it's not going to happen. The simple fact is replacing the rotor isn't going to fix the problem long term. It's well documented that lateral runout between the hub and rotor can cause the rotor to wear improperly, and that's the root cause of most pulsation that we see in braking systems. In fact, I commonly go into groups that I talk to and I ask the question, have any of you driven a car with brakes that shake? And not only does everyone's hand go up in the room, but 3 or 4 people will say, yeah, my car's actually doing that right now. And the reality is rotor replacement will mask the problem for a short period, but it won't repair it. If you're offering rotor replacement as the sole option for fixing your brakes, depending on the vehicle, that can be costly. And if a rotor can be resurfaced successfully, which many can, there's 100% gross profit on labor, so you can still make good margin by resurfacing, but you can also get your customer out the door at a better price point, which helps you sell more brake service. All rotors are cast iron. So it doesn't matter whether I have a used rotor with 30,000 miles on it or a new rotor with 0 miles on it. If there's runout present in the hub, it's going to impact how that rotor wears, and both will be susceptible to pulsation. I look at it this way. You wouldn't put a tire on a rim without balancing it. Well, the same principle applies to rotors. You wouldn't put a rotor, new or otherwise, on a hub without, you should be checking it for runout once it's installed. And if that runout exceeds the manufacturer's limit, you need to correct it. We've got a long track record with most major OE manufacturers that have released service bulletins that are widely documented saying if you put a new rotor on a vehicle and the rotor exceeds the lateral runout limit, you must machine it with an on-car lathe. You know, our on-car machine is very fast, okay? It's not a process that takes a lot of time. We're on and off the vehicle in 7 to 10 minutes. So like for instance, if you have a Ford F350 in your shop, normally the R&R time to pull those rotors off and replace them is going to be about 2 hours plus, depending on how efficient the tech is. We can be on and off that truck in 20 minutes on both sides and literally have the thing out the door in under 45 minutes. So what you might have set aside a half a day blocking your bay, keeping you from bringing other customer vehicles in, we can have that vehicle out of the shop in under an hour so that you can move on to your next paying customer. So from a productivity standpoint, you know, or bay productivity standpoint wise, there's some efficiencies that are gained by using our product that can really drive profit in ways other than just selling that brake job. Our machine can basically run continuously as fast as you can possibly set it up and use it. So I do know, for instance, there was a dealership in Connecticut that had a technician, and his sole job at that dealership was to do brake service. He was as fast as could possibly be. He worked flat rate. He was definitely making 6 figures just doing brake jobs day in and day out. And man, could that guy crank out some brake jobs. So the durability of the machine allows it to run 24/7. The limitations of its production capability is directly attached to the user. A knockoff rotor is easy to replace, right? You just pull the old rotor off, you put the new rotor on. But what shops don't realize is a lot of shops don't stock rotors. So first of all, they have to call the parts store and have the rotors delivered, which, you know, a lot of times if they're first call, that's going to be a fast transaction, you know, 20, 30 minutes. But, you know, in that period of time, the car's sitting on the rack and they've got other cars waiting in their lot to come in and they have to wait. Even if it's easy to swap the rotor, having a brake lathe there is going to allow you to just get right onto the vehicle, turn it in under 10 minutes, and you're done. So in less than probably half the time it takes for a set of rotors to be delivered, we could probably have that brake job done by having an on-car lathe there. But more importantly, I think that, you know, generally when you look at vehicles as a whole, you never know what's going to run through your door. Okay, so labor time is going to be a variable expense to your business because like an F250 is going to take you 2.5 hours to pull the rotors off versus a Dodge Neon where the rotors just fall off. You're turning 2.5 hours into 20 minutes. So absolutely, there's profit there. Not just in the fact that you were able to bill out a 2-hour job in 20 minutes, but also because that vehicle's out and the next vehicle's on your rack getting serviced. So, you know, there's a lot of variables, but ultimately, even with an easily replaced rotor, you'll be faster and more profitable, not to mention the fact that, you know, you have to get that vehicle, that customer to give you the vehicle to do the brake service on. And if you're only quoting rotors in the first place, there's a pretty good likelihood you're not selling every brake job, and so that car, you know, isn't even on your rack to begin with because you didn't offer a machining option. Generally, we advise shops to either charge a machining fee, a flat rate fee, or even just you know, something easy like an hour of labor. And if you look at the standard labor rate in most shops today, it's anywhere from $110 to $140 an hour. And a labor operation, there's 100% gross profit. There's no parts that I have to pay out on. I'm just making the full hour of labor. So, you know, it can be financially very good for the shop. And more importantly, it usually allows them to make the quote for the brake service more attractive to the customer and get them out the door at a price point that makes them happy and still make just as much gross profit. Actually, nowadays, there's a cost associated with waste. It's a cost to businesses. It's a cost to the planet. When it comes to waste stream, we've gone out actually and we've measured rotors that were discarded and found that they could have been left in service for thousands and thousands of miles more if they had been turned. You know, there's certain efficiencies gained when the vehicle stops better. because there's no run out. When the vehicle performs better, as the braking system goes, there's a safety aspect. When you add it all together, we can reduce waste, we can obviously help cars stop better. And we see a lot of companies now that are very sensitive to the footprint and how their waste in the shop impacts the planet. And we certainly can help with that by reclaiming rotors that don't have to be sent to the scrap pile unnecessarily. I work in sales, and so, it may sound cliche, but the number one rule for a salesperson is sell a product you believe in. And I can say that not only am I proud of my 31-year career here at ProCut, I'm proud that I've worked for a company that builds a product that fixes cars better, helps our customers make money. I'm truly working in a win-win-win environment.